The following program has been arranged by the Division of Game and Fish.
Here is the story of the Bluegrass State's great outdoors.
This is Kentucky Afield.
Kentucky Afield.
Welcome to Kentucky Afield.
Kentucky Afield.
More than 50 years. And still fit as a fiddle.
This is Kentucky Afield Radio. This is Ron Rohde, Kentucky Afield's first host back in 1953. Now, I'm proud to present Charlie Baglan.
Wild turkey season is upon us, and if turkey hunters abound where you work, you'll see a lot of people taking vacation days over the next 3 weeks. We go inside outdoors on the subject with Zak Danks. He's in charge of Kentucky's Wild Turkey Program. He also leads the efforts in Ruffed Grouse restoration. That's a game bird in eastern Kentucky whose numbers are in decline, and we'll learn why. Grouse, turkey, two great Kentucky game birds. Next on Kentucky Afield Radio.
I didn't know when I woke up that morning that birds would stop singing or the sun would stop shining.
Alex Audie, 13-year-old survivor of a collision with a drunk boater.
No one told me because they didn't know themselves. Blindsided, my legs were shattered, it broke my neck, I lost my leg, and I almost lost my life.
Lake Harrington, Kentucky.
It's illegal to drink in public, and Kentucky waterways are public.
When we arrived on the location, there were still beer cans floating on the water.
Contrary to popular belief, beer and boating don't go hand in hand.
Her personal watercraft was in shambles, and the bass boat was flipped on its top.
By all accounts, I shouldn't be here. But before that first scream or the care of the first responders, the first thing that saved my life was my life jacket.
Life jackets.
They're like little angels. They lift you up.
Kentucky boating and conservation officers remind you.
Your life jacket's got your back.
Welcome to Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglan. It's two birds with one stone today on the show. One more powerful than a locomotive, the wild turkey, and the one that could use a little help, the ruffed grouse. The one stone is the wildlife biologist who oversees both programs, Zak Danks from the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife in the Frankfort headquarters. Mr. Danks, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here again, Charlie.
You know what I did this morning? Twice this week, I sneezed 7 times in a row.
Wow.
But anyway, if you sneeze that many times in a row, you must know turkey season's coming because it's spring.
That's right. That's
How about
right.
you? You sneeze a lot like I do?
Oh, bad seasonal allergies. Yeah, I was taking allergy shots and a couple different medications. So, yeah, it's always plagued me. Sneezing that much is about like a gobbler that gets fired up, man. If you hear one gobbling 6-7 times in a row, buddy, you get pretty fired up yourself. Want to talk about turkey season today and your other specialty, ruffed grouse, the Ruffed Grouse and Young Forest Strategic Plan. You were on, was it last summer? Yeah.
Introducing this. Seems like it just moved into the position to start working with ruffed grouse here in Kentucky.
That's right, yep.
Easier said than done?
It is. It's a slow process. There's no doubt about it. I mean, with any management program, species, it takes a while to get things going. And grouse are particularly difficult to manage for because habitat is so critical. There's such a specialist with forest habitat and actively managed forest habitat. So accomplishing that on big scales, it's going to take a while. It's really going to take a while. The grouse plan is, it's laid out as a 10-year plan, but really that's sort of a benchmark that by that time, after 10 years, we can say, well, here's what we've accomplished. But ultimately, we're talking a 20 to 50-year plan would probably be more appropriate in terms of actually where we need, what we need to be thinking about for the future. So it's just a long-term campaign with grouse, and so far we're making some progress within our regions.
I found a press release. You were quoted in it. The first 10 years, you say, Zak Danks, is just getting your foot in the door. Sound familiar? True success is decades down the road. One thing I like what you said here, if we're going to make headway for grouse, we're also going to make headway for a lot of other species. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things you really liked about it. You can't just go out into the woodlands and do something good for one species. If you're going to help one, you wind up helping a whole plate of things.
Sure. Sure, absolutely. And I dare say that all of our biologists out there that work diligently every day, our wildlife management area managers, they're not thinking about one species. They're not thinking about grouse. They're not thinking about deer, turkey, songbirds, whatever. They're thinking about all of it. And that's their job. That's the difficult part. But the nice thing about grouse management is that, yes, when you manage the forest, you're helping so many other species. Whippoorwills are a great example. Folks maybe used to complain years ago when it was they couldn't sleep because of the just incessant calling, singing of the whippoorwill. But nowadays that's changed.
You miss it when it's not there.
Yeah, and that's a species that has particularly declined over the years, and it's largely because the stage of forest growth that they depend on, those younger ages, whether it's after a tornado comes through and wipes out parts of the forest, or a timber harvest, or an old farm field growing up, all that's whippoorwill habitat, and it just happens to dovetail pretty nicely with grouse habitat.
One thing I was hoping we could get into today, that you could explain it not just to me, but anybody listening, and maybe to potential partners out there for the Ruffed Grouse plan, is that we look at a forest and we think the best forest, or the only kind of forest to have, is a mature forest. Big trees, everything you would think. If you were going to take a picture of a forest, you'd want that to be the picture. But forests come in various stages of growth and disturbance. What would use habitat that's been blown down by a windstorm?
Oh, lots of species. And I talk about it in the grouse plan a lot because it's reality. A lot of the species that will come in and use those places have been declining. I mentioned the whippoorwill. That's a songbird that, man, they're going to be in that scrubby early successional, we like to call it, soon after that. Yellow-breasted chats, and they really like that early stage of growth. Even birds that we typically think of as older growth species, like the cerulean warbler, that species in particular probably historically used forests that were very complex. They had tall trees with well-developed canopies, and they would have also used gaps in the canopy, or maybe nearby stands of trees that had gotten knocked over by a storm, straight line wind or something, ice damage, whatever, because that's where they'll take their fledglings to go feed during the summertime, because those areas, these young growth, nasty, thicket, young growth places, from our perspective, are actually super rich with food resources for birds, and that's caterpillars, that's ants, beetles, and softmast, so berries and other fruits and things. So it's really important for songbirds in particular. Not to mention, you'll have everything from box turtles to snakes and small mammals. The key is what you said, are a disturbance, and that's a hard thing for the average person. It's hard to grasp that disturbance is a natural part of the ecosystem, and hundreds of years ago, natural disturbance is what would have provided habitat for so many of these species. But today, we've altered our environment. People have to live. We have farms. We have communities. And so we've changed the makeup of the landscape. And it's devastating when a tornado comes through and wrecks things. The flip side is for wildlife, sometimes that's an opportunity to replenish habitat for certain species. The big picture, though, is that with all this human development on the landscape, those natural disturbance processes aren't able to benefit wildlife the same as they did hundreds of years ago. So we have to purposefully make this habitat for these critters. And again, if you care about the full suite of species, what we like to call biodiversity, that's why you need to be thinking about the value of younger forest along with those beautiful, big, majestic, older forests that we all like to see. They're both, we need some of all of it,
Yeah.
And we just have an imbalance right now. We have a lot of forests that are from 40 to 65 years old. We sort of have a glut of this middle-aged stuff, and we don't have much young forest, and we don't have very much really old forest.
You need some new blood out there in the forest.
You do, right. And like I say, given the pressures on habitat from the way we've changed the landscape, you've got to make it happen.
So you have a windstorm, comes through, blows down a grove of trees. After the tree dies, then is the habitat no good anymore, or does it still have a part to play out there?
It's certainly valuable. Once the tree dies, starts breaking apart, the bark starts sloughing off, we call it. Well, that's prime roosting habitat for bats during the summertime. Female bats, especially our endangered tree roosting bats like the Indiana bat, will get up under that loose bark, and that's where she'll have her babies. And during the summertime, that's a critical habitat for her. So as these trees die and break down, they're important habitat for bats. They harbor insects, and so woodpeckers will use them. Of course, they make cavities that develop over time. That everything from raccoons to black bears could use those things. Reptiles and amphibians that could be using those kind of features. So it's just part of the dynamics of the forest. That's what's fascinating as a biologist, to think about those kind of details, and then how do you ensure the conservation of those features across the landscape.
We are talking about how science helps us to see a difference in the outdoors. Back to the future, and that future being 1980. We'll explain after the break. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. We're back on Kentucky Afield Radio. My name is Charlie Baglan. We're talking to Zak Danks today, who is the state's foremost authority on two subjects, ruffed grouse and the wild turkey. Opening day of wild turkey hunting season is upon us, and on the subject of ruffed grouse recovery. Having the eyes of a biologist is different from having the eyes of, let's just say anybody else. We like pretty places, manicured lawns. We like trees that are standing tall and proud. Trees blow down in the woods. Oh, what a shame that had to happen. I liken it to, I remember when I was a little boy, my mother would rearrange the furniture in the living room, or we would rearrange the furniture in our bedrooms. Did you do that?
Oh, yeah.
It's sort of similar, but you learn to like it and say, hey, this isn't so bad after all. But there are benefits to that. And remember, animals have grown up with this, evolved with this for thousands of years, and they kind of need this rearranging of the furniture in the woodlands.
Mm-hmm. Very much, yep.
Especially the ruffed grouse.
Right. Yeah, grouse are absolutely dependent on it. Again, I have to talk about the trees themselves. Disturbance is actually good for certain tree species.
Sunlight gets in there.
Sunlight hitting the forest floor is so critical because some trees cannot regenerate under the shady canopy of a closed, older, mature forest. And they have to have sunlight getting through there. Oaks and hickories are a good example. They are what's called moderately to highly shade intolerant. So they need lots of sunlight. They have to have sunlight getting in there. And so these disturbances can help them grow. And of course, oaks and hickories are just so important for wildlife because of the hard mass, the nuts that they produce, acorns and hickory nuts.
So for ruffed grouse, what's the population today? Is there an estimate?
We don't have an absolute number, and honestly, having an absolute number probably wouldn't mean anything. Everything is relative, okay? Getting actual population estimates or figures is extremely difficult to do, and it would be very expensive, and it's not even that valuable. What's valuable are the relative populations, the trends over time. So what we know from the surveys that we conduct is that grouse numbers are very much down from where they were 20, 30 years ago. One survey that we rely on is from grouse hunters themselves. We ask them to voluntarily report their hunts, how many times they go hunting, how many hours they spend out there, whether they use dogs, how many birds they shot at, flushed. And from that, the metric that we use, the figure, is flushes per hour. And we've seen that figure really decline since the late 80s. Grouse hunters seek out and typically understand what grouse habitat looks like. So they're seeking out the best available habitat, and yet still we've seen declines in that flush rate, the flushes per hour, and that's a pretty good indicator of the state of our grouse population. We also conduct drumming surveys across the state, and we've seen those really fall off as well. And these trends, I should say, hold for many other Appalachian states. I just got back from a conference in Indiana. The conference was really about oak and wildlife forest management. They actually asked me to speak about what we're planning to do in Kentucky for grouse and young forest, because it's a problem everywhere. Indiana is in dire straits with the few grouse that they have. They're about to lose their grouse because they don't have a diverse forest in terms of ages of trees and structure that grouse depend on. Similarly, Ohio has seen drastic declines in grouse, and most of the southern states have as well. We're on the fringe of grouse distribution here in the southern central Appalachians. It's just, the species is much more prevalent farther north. And so it's always on the edge of the range. You're always going to be a little more susceptible to population declines if you don't have habitat conditions in play.
For anybody to be a partner in this, they're going to want to see progress. If you're going to contribute to a cause, you want to see that goal met. Now, you mentioned this is going to take decades, and decades isn't something we can easily wrap our minds around. I want to see results tomorrow. I want to see results next year.
Right.
You had set a benchmark here of 1980 for getting the number of ruffed grouse back into the woods that were there more or less to the tune of 1980. Yeah,
that date was actually set by the National Ruffed Grouse Plan, which was a multi-state effort. It was published in 2006, and they worked on it for several years, and it was an attempt to say, okay, all these states recognize the decline in ruffed grouse, and we're going to have to do something, so let's pick a time when things were relatively good for grouse to shoot for. So most grouse managers for state agencies would love to say 1980 is our date. However, that's even a little bit unrealistic at this point, given the monumental challenge of getting to that point. By 1980, a lot of old farm fields were still available, and so there was a lot more grouse habitat on the landscape. We used the forest more. We cut more trees then. That's what I mean when I say it's going to take us decades to get back.
Like Back to the Future.
Exactly. So it is very much like Back to the Future.
In 2050, it may be 1980 again.
It would be nice, so it just, whether we can actually get to that goal, we don't know. The real indicator for that, or target, is going to be how much young forest we can create. Grouse do best when overall percentage of their landscape that they exist within, has 15, 20+% or more young forest. And right now we are, as a state, and this is including the whole state, not just ruffed grouse range in eastern Kentucky, but Kentucky has, I believe the last figure I saw was maybe 7 to 9% in this really young sapling stage, and that's including western Kentucky, central Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky is probably lower than that, because while we have more forest land, a lot of it is older. So it's going to be a challenge, but we have to have targets, and so 1980 just made a good round year that many states agreed on.
Well, I was wondering if we could say this is 2017. Mm-hmm. Have you gotten yet to the year 2016?
Yes, I did want to pat on the back some of our staff for what they did accomplish in 2016. These guys have been working hard. I didn't have anything to do with this other than just spearheading, sort of marshaling our overall effort. But for 2016, our Northeast region accomplished over 2,000 acres of forest management.
Nice.
And of course, that includes an array of different practices, different ways to skin the cat, so to speak. 70 acres of that were commercial timber harvest, again, done for the explicit purpose of wildlife habitat. They did over 600 acres of what we call forest stand improvement. This is selectively cutting certain trees, less desirable trees, to allow more sunlight in, for example, to help regenerate oak trees, to create little pockets of young forest habitat. They burned over 600 acres of forest using prescribed fires. So these are not wildfires that are destructive and unplanned. They're planned, controlled burns done for habitat purpose. That will hopefully regenerate into really good ground-level vegetation that grouse and wild turkeys and songbirds and deer, elk all use for forage cover. We controlled 400 acres of invasive species. So we have to talk about necessarily when we talk about opening the forest canopy with forest management, inevitably all that sunlight is going to favor a lot of aggressive, invasive, exotic plant species, and so we have to attack those, and they're doing a great job doing that. And even in 2017, they've already made some strides. We've got at Paintsville Lake, for example, they've already accomplished 63 acres of timber stand improvement work, almost 60 acres of work at Clay Wildlife Management Area. We have a commercial timber harvest 55-acre cut going on at Fleming Wildlife Management Area. So just lots of other things. We've had some more work done on our alder project at Yatesville. We've had some forest management going on at Grayson. We've got a new manager on the ground there, and he's already hitting the ground running. Again, hats off to the region. This is not what I'm doing. This is what our staff have been and continue to work toward this effort. I've got to give a big shout out to the Kentucky Grouse Hunters Association, who's very kindly contributed $8,000 to us in terms of they bought us some chainsaws, they've bought us some shrub seedlings, a bunch of herbicide that we'll use for habitat treatments, and also got a shout out to the Commonwealth chapter of Quail Forever out of Louisville. They've given us $5,000.
You have been a busy man, and you have had a busy shop. I guess the point I was trying to make, if it's 2017 now, it sounds like the work you did in 2016 may have advanced this along to maybe 2013 or 2012. I'm not sure. But do you see I'm trying to go backward on the timeline?
Go backwards as we go forward.
Is that a fair way to look at that? So maybe even the non-forester could understand?
Yeah, I guess that's a fair way to look at it. It's incremental. It's steps. Ultimately we're going to have to step up efforts and do more, but...
You may have done a couple of years' work in a year, according to the timeline.
Things have been pretty bad for a while, so we've got nowhere to go but up in terms of habitat. We're definitely making some strides.
It's good to know what's happening outside our back door. Often it helps to get the scoop from other states and what we can apply here at home from what they are learning, from their discoveries. Which state goes to the head of the class? That answer when we come back. Plus, Wild Turkey Chatter still to come. Opening day April 15th and runs all the way through May 7th. Plus, our fishing report is standing by. Stay tuned. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. We're back on Kentucky Afield Radio's Charlie Baglan. Listen, if you would like to hear this show again or share the link or email the link with someone who likes ruffed grouse and wild turkey, it's easily done. You can find our links on Facebook. Just put Kentucky Afield Radio in the search box and voila, there we are. Also on YouTube. Find the link there. You can listen to the show. And we are a podcast on iTunes. More with Zak Danks. First up, our fishing report.
This is Jeff Crosby with the Central District Fishing Report. Water temperatures at area lakes are in the mid to upper 50s. There are good reports of crappie being caught at area lakes such as Taylorsville and Gist Creek Lakes. Crappie are being caught around brush and treetops on live minnows or crappie jigs fished in about 2 to 12 feet of water. Largemouth bass fishing is picking up at area lakes. Lakes to fish for largemouth this time of year would be Taylorsville, Harrington, Gist Creek, or Kincaid Lakes. These bass can be caught on a variety of lures, spinner baits or crankbaits fished on points associated with good spawning coves. This is also a great time of year to fish the upper portions of Harrington and Taylorsville Lakes for good catches of white bass. Finally, don't forget about your local fins, lakes. So grab a pole and enjoy some great spring fishing. Hope to see you on the water.
Hi, this is Kevin Fry with your Eastern Area Fisheries Report. Trout stocking at tailwaters and some streams starts up this month. East Area stockings looking to be for April 6th through April 11th. You can check the exact date at the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife webpage. Some reports at present of white bass and catches at some tailwaters and up into Johns Creek upstream of Dewey Lake, and also up into La Visa Fork upstream of Fish Trap Lake. Also, tailwater below Fish Trap Lake Dam producing some white bass on white or smoke color plastic grubs. Crappie success in lakes is being reported good, with males getting darker in color for spawning. Good numbers of larger fish and catches at Fish Trap Lake. Also, at times, some nice larger fish coming from Yatesville and Dewey Lakes.
Hi, this is Eric Cummins with your Southwest Kentucky Fishing Report. Barren River Lake is approaching summer pool and is less than 10 feet from that. Crappie are up shallow, in the brush and laydowns, mainly black crappie at this point, and about 5 to 7 foot of water. Whites are still out on the main lake, drops and structure in about 10 to 15 foot of water. Catfish action is also picking up with cudbait, worms, and liver. At Green River Lake, the lake is at summer pool. Bass are still on the main lake points and channel drops with lipless crankbaits, crawdad and shad crankbaits, and spinnerbaits. Crappie are still mainly on the channel drops and out on the laydowns and brush there. As always, good luck and good fishing. Be sure your life jacket's got your back.
Dear Mom, thank you for all the times you told me to go outside. Putting me on trails put me on the right path.
If you wrote Mother Nature a letter, what would you say?
That's easy.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
You're amazing.
And so are you. If your license plate at home or at work says Nature's Finest, you've helped protect nearly 100,000 wilderness acres across our state for all to enjoy.
And we're not done yet.
Explore more at heritageland.ky.gov.
Hunting elk in Kentucky is a dream come true for many, and I want to add my name to that list.
And I want to add mine.
If you want to add yours,
the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife website is Elk Central. The Pick 4 option lets you put your name in the hat for cow, bull, archery, or firearm.
Plus youth tags.
The deadline is midnight, April 30th.
This could be my year.
And it could be yours.
Register for incredible Kentucky elk hunting at fw.ky.gov.
We're back on Kentucky Afield Radio in our second half hour. My name is Charlie Baglan. The topic this hour is a 2-for-1 special, Ruffed Grouse and wild turkey. We're talking with Zak Danks. Of course, the wild turkey in Kentucky was once outnumbered by ruffed grouse, and the plan to help the wild turkey recover has been wildly successful. Details on the opening of wild turkey season is just ahead. But first, let's wrap up with grouse. Zak Danks, Fish and Wildlife Biologist. There's no way in the world you can do this by yourself.
Another exciting thing in the line of partnerships, we're working with the U.S. Forest Service on the Daniel Boone. Our southeast region is leading the way with this new program they've got. It's called the Good Neighbor Agreement, Good Neighbor Authority, and it allows us to partner with the Forest Service to essentially get more work done. It can involve hiring personnel devoted to certain projects. We're going to be using that to develop habitat areas on the forest, make forest openings, treat invasive species. It's a really neat program that we're starting into and hope that it can lead to more work on the Daniel Boone within our wildlife management areas and other targeted management areas. So hats off to the southeast region as well. And then I have to also thank our wildlife health program. I've been working with our vet, Iga Stasiak. She's been very helpful in starting a West Nile virus sampling effort. Some recent news coming out of Pennsylvania and some research that West Nile virus is potentially affecting grouse to a degree we hadn't been able to quantify until recently.
I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah. And so Pennsylvania noticed a big drop in their flush rate. Well, they use that as a metric, an index of their population too. They saw a big dip in that in about 2001, 2002. That corresponds with when West Nile moved through Pennsylvania.
Certainly.
And then there was another late 2010s, I forget, maybe 2011 or so. There was another outbreak, and they're really starting to put the pieces together. They've done some experimental work with wild captured grouse eggs. They've actually incubated them, hatched them, and experimentally infected them with the disease in order to see how it affects them. And it's pretty apparent that it does cause pretty severe damage to heart, lung, other tissues, and leads to mortality in grouse. We just don't know how bad the problem is. So another thing they've done is to start a sampling effort where they ask hunters to submit blood samples from grouse they kill. The lab tells us what percentage of those birds had antibodies to West Nile virus, which basically just is another clue maybe to how West Nile is moving through the population. It's just a piece of information, and it's not perfect. But Pennsylvania, this is their second year doing that. Kentucky and also Virginia, Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, we both embarked on an effort. So we actually gathered 29 samples to date of blood samples from hunters. They just got sent off to the lab here a couple weeks ago. So we're waiting on the results. But it's really neat to be, becoming a part of a research project that's going to shed light on another mortality factor for grouse.
Did this come as a surprise? Did you anticipate this little wrinkle in the project?
Well, I had heard murmurings about this, and certainly grouse managers have been aware for a long time that grouse are they're susceptible to disease. Many factors. Many predators like to kill grouse. Weather has impacts on grouse, especially production. Number of chicks that get recruited into the population. So disease is one factor that we know as biologists. In studying the species ecology, we know that plays a role, but it's a hard thing to study. It just so happens that this research of late is really highlighting, and all this is very fluid, it's still coming out, but what's interesting from the Pennsylvania research is that the areas of Pennsylvania that have better grouse habitat have seen better recovery in their grouse populations compared to other areas that have lost grouse habitat to forest maturation or to development, less forest cover. So there's still a link to grouse habitat, apparently, even with this disease.
I know the public would love to see progress made today, if maybe tomorrow. But do your partners understand the length, the decades that are going to be involved? It's like in this, let's say you're 21 years old, just starting out on a career, and you're putting together a retirement plan. We're talking 40 years into the future or more.
Right.
Would you compare it to that? Do your partners really understand the length of time and the dedication it takes over the long haul?
I think that a number of our partners do. Many of our partners are other natural resource agencies, and they get it. They understand the monumental challenge that we're talking about. To change the course of a species across an entire range is a monumental feat, and it would take so much, even on focal areas, wildlife management areas where we're really choosing to focus our resources and efforts. Even there, it's going to take a long time. So I think a lot of our partners understand, grouse hunters in particular. They understand what grouse habitat is, but as a grouse hunter myself, it's hard to swallow sometimes. It's almost, it's very difficult to sort of accept that we can't just flip a switch and make things better.
I'm wondering if there's something out there working against you naturally. Let's say you're wanting to get back to 1980. Weren't nearly as many deer then. Do you have any trouble with deer coming along, maybe even elk, and eating those saplings, that new growth that'll come along?
It's a great point, Charlie, and you're just pointing at another of many complexities that factor into this. It's not as simple as just creating young forest. There's so many factors that influence how a forest grows, and certainly browse pressure is one of those. Now, in eastern Kentucky, deer densities are low. We do have elk, and so there's certainly questions about how they'll impact the vegetation. At the same time, we have to focus on creating the habitat, and in some ways, there's opportunities to manage for both, and we'll have to be observant of how things change. But certainly hunting plays a role to help control the population, and that's just a critical thing for folks to understand, is that we love deer. We love seeing a lot of deer every time we go hunting or we go out driving. We like to observe them, but there is a carrying capacity that the number of animals the landscape can support, and when deer are approaching that or exceeding that, then they have impacts to the forest that will affect things decades down the road. So,
for anybody who hears this and says, that Zak Danks has a good program going there, and maybe my company or maybe my club or my hunting group or me as a person could help, should they contact you? Is there a website to go to? What's your advice?
I'll be glad to speak with anyone that wants to talk. Yeah, I've got some ideas about how folks can help. They can certainly join one of the grouse groups. They can first and foremost buy a hunting and fishing license, because that's how we get funded, and those dollars can be used. Even if you never use the thing, the money still helps. Absolutely. Consider it as a habitat stamp, if you will.
Well, good luck, and wanted to have you here also for Talk a Little Turkey. Mm-hmm. Opening day, 15th. You got it circled? You ready?
Oh, yeah, sure. I've got it circled in red on my calendar. I hope lots of other folks do, too. Yeah, we're pretty excited, and all indications are that we should have a really good spring this year for turkey hunting.
What has the fact that we didn't have a winter, how's that affect what hunters will find out there come opening day?
Well, just biologically speaking, research has shown that the better condition hen turkeys are in coming into the spring, the more eggs they can lay, the more viable those eggs will be. Hopefully
that's good for next year.
Poults. Exactly. So anytime we have a milder winter, it usually bodes pretty well. Although we don't have just harsh winters here like the northern states, where winter can truly affect populations. It still helped that we had a mild winter for them. Also, just the fact that having such an early spring, it's led to a lot of early green up, and people are seeing birds, and those birds are out eating lots of good fresh greenery. So
how early did you start hearing gobbling and seeing some strutting?
I've got reports of gobbling a couple weeks ago, but they may have been gobbling before that. They're probably gobbling and strutting now.
That's turkey for, hey, Zach, I'm over here.
Yeah, that's
They're
right.
calling your name.
Sure. Yeah, they're taunting me. Yeah, along with a whole bunch of other hunters. And
I saw a figure that you had put in a press release, somewhere between 220,000 and 250,000 turkeys in this state. That's a bunch.
Sure is.
That's about a quarter of the number of deer. But you were talking, when we left off in the last half hour, there is a carrying capacity. Are we approaching that, do you think, with wild turkey?
Things are starting to point in that direction. We can't say for sure, but based on what we know from several other states that have had turkeys longer. In other words, they started the restoration program sooner than us, or they never lost their turkeys to the degree we did. Missouri is a good example. They actually saw a decline in their harvest in the early 2000s. And they seem to be fluctuating from year to year. Year to year, things change. Population levels fluctuate from a number of factors. Another thing we look at is our summer brood production. So we conduct surveys. We have staff and volunteers that in July and August, they record observations of turkeys. But those surveys are done in many other states, in the Southeast and in the Midwest. The absolute commonality amongst many states with these brood production is a decline in brood production. Huh. And what's interesting is that decline in brood production has happened at the same time populations have grown and in some states leveled off. What this is pointing to kind of gets at that carrying capacity issue. I'll throw out another piece of jargon here, lingo. Biologists call it density dependence. And what that means is for any wildlife population, there is a level that the habitat can support. That's carrying capacity. So as the population grows, there are fewer and fewer resources per capita for each animal. Perhaps it's getting harder for any individual hen to find that just excellent nesting spot.
Right.
So a higher percentage of them are relegated to nesting in subpar places, and perhaps that's leading to more losses of nests and brood, but the turkey population can't grow forever. So we're watching it closely, and we hope things don't change, but inevitably the populations are subject to so much variation that we're just going to be watching this over time.
Spring wild turkey season. The man with the plan, Zak Danks, with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, back with some final thoughts. Stay tuned. You're listening to Kentucky Afield Radio. Kentucky Afield Radio, this is Charlie Baglan. Our final few minutes with Zak Danks from the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife Department. He is their wild turkey specialist. 30 or 40 years ago, we had zip of these birds, talking about wild turkeys. Now they are plentiful in every county. Before the break, Zach, we left off talking about how many we possibly could have. Here's what I've seen. Let's take into account deer in Florida. Lots of them there, and they're not a whole lot bigger than, say, a collie or German shepherd in many cases. What I don't want to see here, and you just tell me if I'm even on the right track or not, turkey populations do continue to grow, and the resources to feed them, the carrying capacity of the land, dwindles. Will we see more turkeys, yet they're smaller?
With any individual turkey, if it can't get the resources it needs, it's going to be in less condition, so a less healthy condition.
Similar to famine in Ethiopia.
Right.
Lots of people, but
right.
they're...
But you have to keep in mind the lifespan of turkeys, too. They're shorter-lived species, typically, than deer. They do produce a lot of eggs, but maybe they live a little bit longer than grouse, but their strategy, their life history strategy, we call it, is to lay a lot of eggs, Many of the nests that are out there don't survive. Of the nests that do hatch successfully, those broods of poults, many of them won't survive. If they can make it to 3, 4, 5 weeks old, they've got so much better chance of making it. But when it comes to brood production, typically it's 2 years down the road that we see real impacts for turkey harvest, because in years when we have just lots of gobbling, typically that's because we have a lot of 2-year-old gobblers in the population. So,
what do you expect a total harvest? What would you project for this spring season?
I would like to say we have a least hit our average. I mean, that always feels good at
31K or so.
Yeah, right. If we could get somewhere close to that, that would be nice. I mean, that's been sort of the trend the last several years around that number. Of course, it's always great to exceed and everything.
I want to know.
It's variable.
How a third of those can come from your home county. You're from Logan County, and you must be all your buddies out there taking advantage of the resource. Where did I get this number? 9,274 were harvested. Was this last year or the year before?
Logan was the top county last year in terms of birds harvested. I want to say maybe Muhlenberg was second. Excuse me, I don't remember the exact numbers. I can't really remember if that's last year or what, but Logan County is interesting because it's a really good mix of it has the habitat turkeys need. There's a lot of woods, but there's a lot of small farm fields, plenty of agriculture spread about. Southern end of the county is really heavily farmed, but yet there's still enough turkey habitat to support populations. It's just a good mix, and that Muhlenberg, Todd, Butler, Ohio region in there, it's been pretty good turkey habitat for as long as we've had turkeys. So
take an opportunity to go over the regs, the dates, harvest limits.
This year it's actually on April 15th, and it goes through May 7th, Sunday, May 7th. You're allowed 2 birds with a visible beard in the spring. So gobblers primarily or jakes. Of course, you can shoot hens if they're bearded. Of course, hunting hours 30 minutes before sunrise to 30 minutes after sunset, pretty standard. No calling birds before the season.
Telecheck.
Telecheck is a requirement, absolutely, and that's a great point. Folks have to realize how important that is. One, it's our primary means of gauging the population level. From harvest, we can make inferences about the population, so it's critical. It's a critical tool. I just feel like people might take it more serious if they understood why we need that information. It's not so we can go and try to give someone a ticket. It's so we can manage the resource. So it's just a plug in there to people so they understand the value of telecheck. And it gives us real-time information. So when that season's over, we've got to figure, hey, we'll know if we exceeded or didn't exceed our average harvest for the last few years. So it's good information to have and good information to help us plan.
Harvest log?
Yes. When you harvest that turkey, get your harvest log out. Print one off, make your own on the back of your license, but you have to record the species, county, your personal information, phone address should be on there. Report beard length if it's greater or less than 6 inches, and that's information, again, that's very helpful for us to know.
Take advantage of this opportunity to put in a plug for hunting public land. You got a lot of farms out there, a lot of privately owned land,
right? And
hunters will take advantage of those, and I don't blame them. Mm-hmm. But what opportunities are waiting for public land, wildlife management areas, and the like?
I've said it before, but our staff works really hard to manage that habitat for really a diversity of habitat types, and that plays in perfect for turkeys. We do a lot of prescribed burning to renew grassland habitats and forest management to improve the forest. All this is geared towards helping turkey populations. So I plan to hunt at least 1 or 2 WMAs myself. And I'm going to go in there and just realize, I'll probably see some other people, but I'm going to be working to get back areas maybe that other hunters wouldn't get to. I'll try to be patient, just realizing that I'm going to hear other hunters calling, and that's going to influence my strategy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be looking. I mean, you have to work hard to hunt public land. You have to doing some scouting, of course, is always a good idea, but you probably have to be willing to not call when otherwise you might call if you were on private lands with less hunting pressure, because those birds will get call shy.
Do you need to call in advance? Do you need to sign in when you get there?
No. Most of them you don't. We don't just do some scouting. I do encourage people to give them a call. The numbers are listed in our hunting guides. You can call and speak to that manager and get a sense for the habitat of the area and their recommendations or how much hunting pressure they typically receive. That's part of doing your homework, Gosh, with the internet now, you can look on, get on our website, go to maps, and you can search, you can get directions to the place, you can get an overall view, aerial photography of what the place looks like. You can sort of have 2 or 3, plan A, plan B, plan C, that you can sort of plan your hunt depending on other hunters you see or the day or, these different things. So call ahead, do some planning, and part of doing your homework.
Zach, you do a lot of hard work for the ruffed grouse, the wildlife, and the wild turkey, riding herd over all of these things. We certainly appreciate what you do, and I'm glad you came on the show today.
I really appreciate it, Charlie.
Good luck in the turkey woods.
You bet. Good luck to everyone out there. Thanks a lot.
Opening day, April 15th, runs through Sunday, May 7th. Good luck. Go get 'em. We are out of time. This is Charlie Baglan inviting you to join us in a week, and we'll go inside outdoors again here on Kentucky Afield Radio.